SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. 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 SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu.
Hello. knew this early last year when Mark, our founder and executive director, and myself first traveled here in Fumba town. This was February 2023. And I was blown away by the magic of Zanzibar when I first came here and the magic of Fumba town. And so immediately I shot Leonard an email and I said, I think I found your East African hub for ASE. And sure enough, 2 months later, he was on a plane here to Zanzibar. He met with Sebastian and he met with Honorable Minister of Education in Zanzibar, both of whom were extremely keen and eager to have such a high quality come and set up shop here in Zanzibar. So that's the story. Back in February, we officially got a certificate of incorporation, which we're very, very excited about and proud about, and the funding to start the initial programming. We're also very excited about. So this is the beginning, but we hit some crucial milestones, and we're excited to finally commence operations. Many reasons.
SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV Online.
We've got some amazing partners already lined up. I don't have to use these names, but we'll have that and others, and including partnerships. And previously, Sebastian Zanzibar and Leonard have already been talking about the two institutions as the NYC and East Africa, so the ambitions are set high. So that's private sector attraction. The last key I'll go over here, and we're relatively quick, is people. Right, I mentioned at the beginning, and it will remain true. Cities are not about infrastructure; they're not about buildings. They're about the people. Cities are about history, old history, and allowing them to cooperate and collaborate together to produce great things. And so we're really excited to focus on this pillar as well. The main community members. The main thing that we're focused on in terms of this people is the research that we're conducting in the team in collaboration with partners lowering the price point for housing so that the great environment is accessible to more greater swath of people. I don't have to go into the details. We're looking at different affordable housing schemes across the continent that have shown promise. I think the highlights on this slide is that CCI is up to, policy, private sector traction, and people, and we couldn't be more excited to
one more round of applause, please, for the. Wow. So I think we all saw what great initiatives CCI has been having here in Zanzibar, and I know we all have questions. So do I, but save them for next time. Just as Khadija mentioned, I'm Abdurrahman Bani Shayba, and I'm proud of the work that has been done by CCI as a special project consultant with CCI. And I know it's not about me today, but I can't help it. And say that the next speaker also, I'm proud to call him my mentor, the founder of Wasoko, not Soko, Daniel Yu, Tafadhali Karibu.
Habari za jioni. Hi everyone, I'm very happy to be here with you all today. As mentioned, I'm here to give a bit of an update about Silicon Zanzibar, also introduce for anyone who might not be familiar. Just to kick off though, a little bit about myself. So I'm the founder and CEO of Wasoko, which is a e-commerce company that works now across 5 different African countries. I'm originally from California myself, but I've been living in Africa since 2016. Originally in Kenya, then moved actually over here to Zanzibar. How unfortunately, most recently in Egypt, I must declare, as a result of a merger and expansion up to North Africa. So it's great to be with you all and give a bit of an update on some of the very exciting things that are happening here with Silicon Zanzibar, of which I'm still a very proud partner and champion of going forward. So taking a bit of a step back though, I want to give everyone a bit of a background in terms of the state of technology across Africa. Some of you might have been following and been aware that technology is actually the fastest growing industry in Africa currently. We've seen annual investments grow from less than $500 million to over $5 billion per year in just 5 years. So over 10x growth. And we're seeing a variety of sectors attract this investment across financial technology, e-commerce, as well as green technology most recently. And really, this is happening because of a variety of different factors coming together, but definitely the government initiatives and the partnerships that are in place are playing a crucial role in fostering this. And so I think the big question for any technology movement ecosystem is how do we maintain this momentum? And really, it comes down to 2 things. So one is how do we ensure that more funding continues to come into the technology space in Africa, and how do we also ensure that we're bringing more talent to the space as well. So just to touch quickly on the funding, local spending, driving other jobs and growth in the economy, increased knowledge sharing between these experienced workers and the local ecosystem, as well as greater integration into the global economy. This is ultimately what drives up local economic growth as well. And so all of these background in the act really what led to the Silicon Zanzibar initiative. And so this was launched back in August 2022 with the partnership and the support from Bakari, who was here with us today as well. And really the goal has been about how do we create an open and enabling environment for tech companies and talent to thrive in Zanzibar. And the objectives from this, from the start, we set off 3 objectives, and this is what I want to give the update on. So the first was, how do we establish Zanzibar as that leading destination for tech talent in Africa? The second is, how do we provide technology learning and training opportunities, especially for the Zanzibari workforce? And the third is, how do we establish and relocate the tech companies themselves from across Africa and beyond to Zanzibar, so that we're creating those job opportunities for those graduates, for those workers. To start off on the first one, Zanzibar as a tech destination, this is really actually where I think we have seen a lot of growth and success, especially in the events, in the gatherings and the conferences that have happened. We have one going on here right now, Abdalla, which I think has been quite successful in bringing together leading workers and digital nomads from all over the world to see what's happening here in Zanzibar, be part of the community, build connections with the local ecosystem as well. And as part of that, we even had Bakari come down here a few weeks ago. Bakari, of course, is the founder of Ethereum, and I believe the youngest self-made billionaire in the world. And so definitely when you see Zanzibar attracting those these institutes can be the anchors and really drive huge amounts of innovation and ultimate economic activity and startups, which is exactly what we've seen with leading universities in other markets. There would not be a Silicon Valley without Stanford or UC Berkeley. You would not have the technology cluster in Boston without MIT and without Harvard. And really, I think the analogy of the potential that Curtis gave of these institutes being here in Zanzibar, as we pass forward ahead, a number of years or decades, can really be the same. And so, on the talent development piece, I think we've absolutely achieved a huge milestone with bringing these institutes here into Zanzibar, and I'm really excited about what all the talent coming out of those are going to be building themselves over the years to come. I think the final goal, as mentioned, is ensuring that we establish and attract as many tech companies as possible to Zanzibar. And this is really where I think there's the most focus and room to grow. And so definitely there are already many benefits within existing legislation to attract companies, especially under the economic zone policy. These benefits on things such as the 10-year corporate income tax exemption, and this applies to companies that will be setting up in base here in Fumba, for example. However, I do think that there are still a number of other areas for improvement that can help ensure that the interest that we're seeing, which I believe in total we've seen hundreds of companies that have expressed interest in coming, setting up, being part of the tech ecosystem here. But once again, again, is this question of how do we make sure that we are converting the interest into actual boots on ground, actual spending and investment in the islands. I think that's the real critical catalyst that we need to unlock. And so the areas of improvement, just a short list from what I've seen through my own personal experience, as well as talking to other tech companies, is really looking at can we simplify the business incorporation process, ideally such that it can become fully digital, ensuring that we increase the coverage and reduce the cost of high-speed internet, opening more spaces where small companies can co-work and individuals can also grow and expand their work flexibly, and finally streamlining the residence and long-stay visa processes so that tech workers, digital nomads, the talent that we want to attract to building companies here is able to easily relocate and integrate into the Zanzibar ecosystem. So these are some of the things, the updates that I wanted to share for those of you who are familiar with Silicon Zanzibar, as well as for those who maybe weren't as familiar. But with that, I wanted to say something exciting.
Thank you, Donald. Without further ado, we should move to the next. As we said earlier, it's not about me, it's about the great speakers we have here today. We'd like to welcome the CEO of CCS, whose development we're sitting on as we speak right now. Production vessels.
How is the journey? It's fantastic to see you all, and I'm super excited, and very, very thankful for what CCI is organizing, the fantastic support we are getting from the government yet again to receive in this, but also from our community, people who are here far away visiting us, and other members of the community in Zanzibar, working together for a very long time. And it's like Curtis said, and Daniel said it again, this is not about the developer, this is not about land, it's not about houses, this is really about people. It's all about people. And there is...
have 800,000 people more in the next 10 years to come. Again, adding on those 600,000 we added the last 10 years. So from now on, from 2022 on, we should build at least 13,500 homes every single year, right? It is, sometimes it's a miracle for us. Where are all these people? Because they have to live somewhere. The population is there. But we're building a very small part. Government is driving this. Here there's a lot of developments coming from Citizens F and Zanzibar Housing Corporation, and there's other developers now coming on top of what we're doing. But even we are doing much too little at the moment. And remember, originally it was designed for 500 people, 500 houses. Like some 6, that would be 3,000 people. It's actually not responsible, right? And I remember when we opened in 2015, two guests were here. One was Antonio Forcas, who was an architect who's been working with the World Bank in East Africa for many, many years, and Mohammed Juma, I think he was the urban planner of Zanzibar at that time. And Mohammed was saying to us, I think I like this, but this is wrong. This is totally wrong. And I was like, oh man, I just opened, and now he comes and tells me, this is totally wrong. He says, you can't build 2 floors only high. You You have to build at least 4 floors high, 6 floors high. This is much too low, the density is much too low, right? And we realized very quickly he's absolutely right. So we changed, right? And basically this is the evolution that started basically with, Mohammed saw it then already, that we have to evolve. This can't be the story. 60 hectares, 500 units. This is wrong, right? So Fumba evolved, and let me show you a little bit. And I want to give you an example of where it maybe can go to, right? What can Fumba become? Those of you reading the Fumba Times regularly, which I can recommend everyone to do, would know this story already, right? This peninsula here is not Fumba. This peninsula here is quite far away. This peninsula is today known as Manhattan. And you know what? It is pretty much exactly the same size as the Fumba Peninsula. 14 times 3, approximately, right? And if we know we need an area which is not in conflict with tourism, which the Fumba Peninsula is not. We don't have the white beaches. An area that is close to big infrastructure like the airport. An area where people can move into without destroying big farms or forests. Right? That we should move, that growth, the demand for houses and the construction of houses in a very responsible density, which is higher than 2-story houses, into the Fumba Peninsula. Where else, close to Zanzibar town, can we accommodate 800,000 people more? 600,000 from the previous 10 years. If not, on a peninsula that is on very hard rock, that has sufficient water if we look after it and cater for it well, right? That is very close to international airport, that can have, and that's in our contract with ZEPA, potentially a ferry terminal directly connecting Dar and Zanzibar even faster and even more efficiently, right? So this is where this evolution potentially can go to, right? I know people say, oh, you know, this doesn't fit at all to Zanzibar, but if we grow, if we have the population growth and our space as an island is limited, we need to think long ahead, to say, where do we provide that space for people to potentially live? Especially since all the other coastlines, or like a lot of the other coastline, is dedicated to tourism, right? And the center should provide for our food, because we have very fertile areas in the center of the country, where we're growing rice and maize and even sugarcane and other things, which we have to provide for what we need, that we don't depend on other countries anymore in the future, right? Now we're doing solar projects, we could provide our own energy. So this is really, we need a place where people can live, but in a very different dimension. Let me give you some numbers. So what we need really is a higher density. We need to protect our sea-facing prime properties, right? We need to stop building hospitals. We need to stop building factories, schools on prime sea-facing land and dedicate that to high-end earners for the government, right? Seafront in Zanzibar has to earn the government very high revenues. Otherwise, leave it to the fishermen, right? And you can do both at the same time, like we're trying to do this here. Since the beginning, we left the space where the fishermen are working
online.
open to public.
Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV online. Huu ni wakati wakati wetu. SNTV Online, huu ni 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 wakati.
And some of you might know what the value of houses was in 2016 or 18 in Fumba, what the value of these houses is today. Bankable value has tripled, right? Easily, even more than that. So the value is not only a place where people can live, but it's becoming a center of higher education and innovation with the settling of IIT and now ASE as well. We're supporting sustainable development goals also of Zanzibar is now joining. We are adding to that, the Zanzibar portfolio, we're doing our GI report. We are a hub for jobs and training. We're working closely with universities in Dar es Salaam, in Sokoine University, in Susa University, training people from the university. Okay, I'm going very fast now. We are a hub for innovation and new construction technologies. There's no other development in East Africa, maybe in Africa, that's building so much on sustainable, regrowing timber technology. We could talk a whole evening about that. We are a safe place for families to evolve and live. You know, if you've seen the afternoon amount of kids that are here in town, when new policies are introduced, from now foreigners being able to buy land, and the latest one with our minister making it possible that people investing for more than 100,000 can receive a resident permit, safely living and growing and doing business in Zanzibar. We're a vibrant urban community. We're a place where local businesses can flourish, a place where long-term values are created. Fumba Town, an evolution from supporting a growing population to a vibrant urban center supporting the economic growth of Zanzibar. Fumba on a transition of a supporting town to a city concept. That is what we are talking about. And we're grateful for the help and the support of everyone, our government, CCI, Daniel and his team, and everyone who is here, people who are in the community, right, contributing to this. This is fantastic. We are still not perfect, we're still going to school, but one day will be a big, beautiful city supporting Zanzibar's growth.
To begin by extending my gratitude to the organizers of this event and by being granted this opportunity of being the keynote speaker for this function this evening. Today I want to kind of remove my hat as the minister and speak more freely as a resident of Fumba. For those of you who are not aware, I just live right across from the pavilion. So I'm a very proud resident that has been here for the past year and a half. Very happy with my stay here in Fumba town. Very happy to see the progress and the growth of the town as it evolves organically since the time that I've been here. And so if I may, I would like to also take this opportunity to extend our sincere gratitude to the Charter City Institute, Curtis and the team. They have expressed a vision that to me personally is something that I 100% agree with as the right direction in which we should take to develop our cities on this beautiful island. So thank you to Curtis for enlightening us and showing us on what is possible in terms of utilizing your land effectively, especially when it's limited land like the one that we have here on the islands of Zanzibar. So thank you, Curtis, and your team. I want to emphasize on a very important issue as we talk about all of these advancements and plans that we have in place. We must also consider the fact that we need to localize every single aspect of what we are doing. I'm a very firm believer that somebody or an individual is a product of their environment. For those of us who have had the opportunity to grow up on this island, and I grew up not too far away from here, we own a farm, which is about 10 to 15 kilometers from here. So I'm very familiar of this entire Fumba coast and the peninsula. And I know exactly how things have been for the past 10, 20 years, and how we are envisioning moving forward is something that really has to be taken into consideration. So if we want to make progress, it has to take into consideration the local context. And this is something that I really want to emphasize on. It is one thing to develop a city, a modern city with all the amenities and all the facilities, but it's another thing to make sure that you have a backward and forward integration of the existing communities that are living within the particular area. Oftentimes what we are seeing at the moment, we have a very progressive government, that's fine. We have very progressive policies, that's also fine. And these policies are leading to a lot of advancement in terms of real estate development projects and housing projects. The one thing that worries me at the moment is that there is a lack of connection between these communities that we are developing, where it is literally gated, no integration, no assimilation, no connection with the local community, to such a degree where you ask yourself, what direction are we taking as a country? So these are things that we really have to ponder generally as a public, but as developers, to make sure that we do not make the mistake of thinking that we can have these big gated communities where you have one side of the local population living in these dire conditions, and then you have another side of a population that is living in opulence. There is something that we have to learn. We understand there's a historical context to a lot of these issues in the past, but I think with Charter City, we have a very unique opportunity to make sure that we do not make the kind of mistakes that we are making at the moment, and make sure that we put in the right framework that will provide a synergy between what we are envisioning to do and what our people are expecting from us. So this is one key issue that I wanted to emphasize. We cannot be afraid to open up and engage. We have to be open, we have to be considerate, and we have to set the framework that allows for the local population to feel that they are also part of what we are doing. We have done tremendous work for the past 3 years. As you can see, I'm quite famous. I'm the guy in the middle right there. And most of the pictures that you see, I think, is a reflection of the kind of work that we have been doing for the past 3 years and a half. And I'm very proud to say that we are not shy in terms of engaging, and we are not shy in terms of adapting to whatever needs to be done. And Daniel is Daniel still here? He's left. Okay. And Daniel can testify to this. When we first met to discuss the Silicon Zanzibar initiative, I told him, tell me what you want, and then let's take things from there. Everything from policy, the legal, the regulatory framework was something that was derived from the private sector. Everything that had to do with how we are going to execute the Silicon Zanzibar was provided by the private sector. Daniel, his team, and the rest of the other stakeholders that were present during that time. And everything had moved extremely fast, to such a degree where, for myself and my team, we were a bit worried on how fast we were moving and the concessions that we were making. But we thought, okay, this is necessary, let's see how it goes. And then Charter City came through. We had a few meetings with Curtis, we had a few panel discussions that we did. And so we started seeing that progress that we were all wanting to see or to achieve. So what has happened since? From that time, personally, I have been going around trying to see what model would fit best for Zanzibar. What housing development model would fit best for the islands, and that will cater also to the general public or the general population. And in doing so, we had a few focus group discussions at the ministry. At that time, I was with the Ministry of Investment. Outside of the framework from the Chartered City, I did call in a few experts that I would not mention here today to kind of guide me and see, is this the right decision that we are making, and can we go about this business without considerable backlash from the people in general. You know, if anybody has been around Zanzibar, especially during the times that we are heading to elections, it becomes a very hyper-sensitive environment. Everything becomes politicized. The slightest decisions that you make are under a very close microscope and scrutiny, especially from the general public. From the issue of land in the beginning, and I emphasize this to Charter City, if we are looking to engage with the local communities, it has to be in the framework of a win-win situation. We have land that is limited. It's okay? Okay. He's looking at his watch, so I need to know. So we have land that is limited, but we have people that have been present on the land for generations and generations. How do we convince these individuals, homeowners, that what we want to develop is not going to have a negative impact on their daily livelihoods? And Charter City came up with a magnificent proposal with a recommendation of a huge swatch of land. If I can recall, I think it was around 800 hectares altogether. Curtis, is it correct? 600. 600 hectares. 600 hectares altogether in order to bring everybody under that framework. So I was telling them, this is doable if this is how we want to go about it, but it's going to require a lot of sensitization, and it's going to require a very clear communication strategy. So I want to use this forum to continue to emphasize on what I was highlighting at that time, that we still need to have a very clear, focused communication strategy that will allow for things to move seamlessly. If we have these type of discussions like the ones that we have today, I would classify these as isolated discussions. This is between us, the government. Of course, we have government officials here, but it's only us. I'm seeing the same faces everywhere that I go. At some point in time, it has to go down to the grassroots. We still have to go down and meet the people. We still have to go over there and talk to them. It's one thing to go to His Excellency the President and have these focused discussions with ZEPA and Blue Economy and all of those guys, but if we don't go to the people, none of that would matter. Trust me, I'm talking from experience, because I think I'm the only politician in this building at the moment. So when I say that we need a very clear communication strategy, I cannot emphasize it more that we have to have a very clear communication strategy from the bottom to the top, not top to bottom. My friend Gili, right? Every time we talk, it's like, you know, we had a meeting with ZEPA, we had a meeting with His Excellency the President. I'm like, fine. But there are people out there that you have to go back to. Now, I'm not sure about the timeline, and this brings me to my next point. We still need to have a very clear roadmap of how we want to execute this whole thing. We have the IIT. They've already set up shop. The Africa School of Economics, I'm told, this was breaking news to me here today, that by October, they're gonna be starting. Nothing has happened down there. It's still, we're moving, and we're bringing in all of these stakeholders. Daniel came back, he was away for some time. I presume that the Silicon Zanzibar initiative will continue. So we're gonna expect all of these other tech companies to be able to come in, but there's no clear roadmap of when or how this whole thing is gonna happen. Or maybe it's within you, but it has not been communicated. Now, I'm not looking into the inner workings of how Charter City is going to execute this project, and the engagements that have been planned out, but I thought that this forum would provide a very opportune moment for us to consider these things, because time is of the essence, and we are moving towards an election period. And if we are looking to start executing projects, it means that we need to start that process as soon as possible. So that's my second point that I wanted to emphasize. Another issue that I wanted to touch base on is on what we have been doing on our part as a government. So we continue to make sure that we set up the right environment, we set up the right framework, we put the right regulations and the right policy frameworks in place so that we can be able to support this broader initiative that we have. For the last year and a half, we've been working on the digital nomad visas. So this is something that is already in the works, and we hope that before the end of the year, digital nomad visas would already be available, and our tech guys can start applying for those digital nomad visas. Just a couple of weeks ago, we started granting the resident permits, and this is something that has been in the works for almost 2 years. After the passing of the new Investment Act, we now have officially the resident permits which have already been granted thanks to ZEPA and the Immigration Department. We can now all pursue in obtaining our resident permits if we reach those minimum qualification criteria that are outlined for those visas. So if we need more information, of course, we have our people here from ZEPA, and they can always assist us in application for those permits. The new Investment Act that we passed, part of it in terms of the establishing the digital free zone is something that we worked with very closely with Wasoko and the other ICT teams that were here day in and day out to make sure that we have an investment act that really caters to the digital free zone that we have here in Fumba. So all of these scenarios, all of these incentives that we have are all meant to make sure that once the city that we are envisioning comes to fruition, that everything can move smoothly. We agree on the challenges. A lot of the challenges that were highlighted here, I absolutely agree, but we can all take comfort in the fact that we have a government that is very open-minded and very pragmatic in terms of addressing all of these challenges. So please continue to scrutinize, to advise, to provide constructive criticism. We're always open to receiving that so that we can continue to better ourselves as we move forward. I was very happy to note that we had students here from Susa. And this is a very good platform for them to be here, and I think that's a good starting point as well on our part. As part of the broader strategy for the local engagement, I think when you start with students, you have an audience that can listen, understand, and of course, at the end of the day, communicate everything that they hear to the other students, and then eventually to their homes, their families, and so on and so forth. So this was a very good approach to have the students here, and I would like to commend everybody that thought about that. It's very nice. From the engagement level on the IIT Madrasa and the Africa School of Economics, I would still like to emphasize the point that if we localize our people and we set up these institutions where we can provide opportunity for them to come in and learn, that is the most sustainable way to be able to develop the cities, but also have residents who are a product of that environment. When we were looking into the Silicon Zanzibar initiative, one of the key areas that we emphasized on is to making sure that we have ICT hubs that will address the local talent that is here on the island. We all know how many graduates are coming out of school each year, whether they graduated in computer science, engineering, ICT, but the only missing link is that they don't have a space to where they can showcase their talent. And I can assure you that we have enough talent even here within the Fumba Peninsula. So these institutions as well, there should be a special incentive to be able to bring in these young men and women who are hungry for knowledge, who are hungry to demonstrate their know-how, but they just don't have the opportunity. So the key word here that we should take away is providing that opportunity. If we provide that opportunity, I'm very sure we have a lot of takers here who would jump towards that opportunity and run with it. Most of these young men and women that you see here, the ones that arrived, are a reflection of me here, standing today. But at some point in time during my life, somebody provided me an opportunity. And that's why I can proudly stand here as the Minister for Investment and now Tourism. So we have to believe in that local content. We have to shy away from the notion or from the preconceived judgments of that Zanzibaris are not capable, Zanzibaris are lazy, things that I hear very often when I engage with investors, when I engage with developers. It is absolutely not true. And the proof in that, begin Marco. And the proof to that, if you look at this front row, our director for Zanzibar Economic Empowerment Agency, our director from ZIPA, naomba msimame kidogo. These guys were all schoolmates. We went to the same high school right here on this island. So I think I'm slightly older than you, so you can sit down. But this is the case that I'm trying to make, that there's enough local talent right here, inbred, born and raised, that we can fully utilize to whatever endeavor that we're choosing. So, so my messaging, and I would like to conclude, my messaging to all of us here as keen stakeholders, as residents of this island, I think we have a very unique opportunity in this story or this journey that we have begun. And I think each and every one of us has a huge role to play, to kind of shift the dynamics, shift the stereotypes, and be realistic in terms of what we want to achieve and actually execute and be able to achieve those goals. And lastly, I would like to finish by emphasizing on the continued responsible investment, especially by taking into consideration the environment. Sustainable investment is very critical for the island. When I was told about this event, I decided to wear green as an emphasis for that messaging. So I'd like to emphasize to everyone that we are all responsible in taking care of this fragile ecosystem that we call home, Zanzibar, and continue to engage in responsible investment practices in making sure that our environment remains clean, we use sufficient resources, we use as much as possible local material, and that's how you address the issue of poverty. There's no other way. If you're an investor and you're investing on the islands, but all of your building material is coming from Dubai or China, all of your furniture is coming from Dubai or China, and then at the end of the day, we see that the jobs that are being provided in that particular establishment are going to other people other than local Zanzibaris, you're not an investor. And for lack of a better term, it's actually daytime robbery. You're robbing the people, or you're robbing the island. So these are small issues that we don't take into consideration, but they have a very huge effect long term. And like I said before, I'm a politician. I know the sensitivity of when people become dissatisfied because of the lack of opportunities and they see that wealth is being transferred somewhere else. So apologies, I decided to put out a bit of an activism hat, but I think sometimes it's necessary to speak the truth, especially when we're dealing with you know, individuals or stakeholders that are as extremely talented and powerful and very capable like the ones that I'm seeing here today. Baada hayo, asanteni sana, and thank you so much for your attention.
Asante, asante. Asante, asante, Mheshimiwa. Thank you. Now I think we have had, I cannot add anything to that great speech. Now I think we have heard from entrepreneurs, we have heard from policy researchers, we have heard from policymakers who have all been involved in the projects on the ground here in Zanzibar. Probably now it's time to hear from people who are coming with a bit fresh perspectives. Our next guest, with his background as an associate professor of economic psychology at the London School of Economics and Political Science, LSE, in England. He's an affiliate of the Developmental Economics Group at the LSE, Styserd, Technical Director of UBC's Database of Religious History, and Cypher's Azrieli Global Scholar in the Boundaries, Membership and Belonging Program. His main area of interest is the application of research in cultural evolution to public policy. He recently wrote a book called The Theory of Everyone, which he'll come himself talk about his book and also his work he's been doing. Michael Muthukrishna, welcome.
All right, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm honored to be here. It's interesting, I'm an outsider to all of this, but my talk, although I didn't watch any of the talks, including the Honorable Minister's talk, echoes a lot, I think, of what's been said already today, but I think we'll put a little bit of scientific flesh on it. So I do work in the area of cultural evolution, which you'll see as soon as my slides appear. I work in the area of cultural evolution, which is the science of how cultures change over time and how it is that humans came to be in the world that we live in today, where we dominate every ecosystem available. And specifically, I'm interested in the role that culture plays in understanding our behavior, in understanding innovation, in understanding conflict, in understanding cooperation, and in understanding economic development. So this book, which is really an attempt to popularize or help people understand this science, is a reflection of where we are in our understanding of human evolution and cultural evolution. And as you can see from some of these endorsements, it's an area that crosses many traditional disciplines. So there are people here from human evolution biology, history, psychology, archaeology, energy science, philosophy, biology, and so on. And these are really required to understand a problem or a question as big as how did humans appear here? How is it that culture evolves? How is it that culture affects all of the things that we face with in the world today? On Thursday, I'm going to talk a lot more about this book specifically, but today what I want to focus on is the role or relationship between cultural evolution and startup cities. So in the book, there's a chapter dedicated to governance in the 21st century. We have inherited a world that we didn't create, institutions. Some of those are path dependent. They were made by decisions made a long time ago, and we're trapped in some sense by them. But startup cities offer us an opportunity to try something different, to explore new possibilities, and thereby create a world that might be more suitable to people of the 21st century and the circumstances that we find ourselves in to tackle the problems that we face. The biggest lesson that I would say that cultural evolution has to offer is that the world was not designed. It's not just that it wasn't designed by people any smarter than the people in this room, but it wasn't designed at all. It was created by people trying different things, remixing, being inspired by things all over, and failing over and over again. And what we see today, UN charters of human rights, the US Constitution and everything that followed from it, corporations incorporated the way that they are today, are the successful experiments of trying many, many different things. So we don't know the paths that we could have gone down. The world, in other words, evolved. It culturally evolved. It was a process of diversity of trying many things, transmission, and selecting the things that happened to work. So we can see this when we look at, for example, national constitutions. So this is one of my favorite papers where it looks at how constitutions are related to one another. And you can see this process of remixing, just as we see biological evolution and we see how species are related to one another. We can see how the language is borrowed. Jordan borrows from Iran, which borrows from Egypt, which traces all the way back to the US Constitution. When Frank Fukuyama wrote The End of History, he wrote it in 1991, and it was an easy thing to do as the Soviet Union fell. Frank himself would say that it would be impossible to write that today. Because when the US experiment seemed like it was working, the Soviet Union had fallen, it seemed like we had a winner, and now we have the rise of alternative models, China and Russia. China in particular, being so economically successful, is a threat to things that we assume about development and how it has to happen. So again, the field is wide open, and startup cities allow us to remix, to borrow the best elements from around the world. This model of trying different things is a model that has been incredibly successful in the tech sector and in startups in general. So when we think about Silicon Valley, we think of it as a bastion of success. You know, we think of the Microsofts, the Amazons, the Apples, Googles, Metas, and NVIDIAs, not all of which are Silicon Valley companies, but all of which are tech companies. But actually, Silicon Valley is not a bastion of success. It is a graveyard of failure. And that's actually what's required for innovation. What we forget are the MySpaces, the Friendsters. LSE is not among those failures, just to be very clear to my employer. AOL, Napsters, Vines, Cools, Yahoo, Blackberries, and the graveyard of the many attempts at trying different things without knowing in advance what would work. Because that's what's actually required for innovation. Now in governance, we don't have that luxury, right? People's lives are at stake, and often you cannot change a political system from the top. Where I live at the moment in the United Kingdom, people are paralyzed. The government is paralyzed because they are afraid of making a decision, knowing that that decision affects the entire country. They made one decision under Liz Truss that didn't go quite so well, and as a result, there's a boldness that's required for Britain that no one is willing to take. Because there is no attempt, there are no special economic zones, as has been set up here. There are no ability to test policies around the country, see if they work, and then bubble them upward. The model that works in Silicon Valley. Cities are where humans increasingly live. I don't want to restate some of what Curtis said, but in 2007 was the point at which 50% of the human population were living in cities. By 2050, around 70% of us will be living, and my two brothers that were born here. But it's nice to me to think that the future is African. If you look at this map of the median age of the continents around the world, it's very clear which continent pops out. It's very clear where the future is going to be. It's Africa, right? You see article after article in places like the New York Times about how the world is becoming more. But when you are still developing, you have the opportunity to not get it wrong, to try the very best and make it work from the beginning. So my answer to why startup cities with the local population is absolutely critical to making sure that it works. Just to echo what the minister said. Does anybody know what this picture is, out of curiosity? It's a painting. Japan, we got one guess for Japan. Any other guesses? Hong Kong. Yeah, so this is a painting of Hong Kong, good. When it was ceded to the 1000. By 1997, when Hong Kong was handed back, it was already this little green spot here in terms of the Human Development Index, right? Over to the country as a whole, Hong Kong became less relevant, and it was why China was unafraid to walk in. By 2015, it was just 3% of GDP. So why did Hong Kong succeed? That's a very big question, but I want to focus on three things. These are the simple answers to why Hong Kong succeeded. Hong Kong succeeded because there was money to be made. And why was there money to be made? Because people had confidence. They had trust in a long time frame. They knew when the new agreement was reached that there was a 99-year lease. There was 100 years, which for most human lifespans may as well be forever. As you can see, people buying properties here for under 99-year leases. They had confidence that they could make a lot of money in that time period. Now, the majority of the population of Hong Kong was never British. It was Chinese. But the Brits brought with them their culture. They brought with them their institutions. They brought with them human capital. They brought with them cultural capital. Then they brought with them financial capital. But they didn't turn it into Britain. If you look, so we have new metrics today for people believe and how they behave all around the world. So it asks them questions about social relationships, about religion, about financial attitudes, about what is right and what is wrong. And then what it does is it compares the distributions. It's actually around 0.1. You can see that Britain is not China either. Britain is quite culturally distant from China. But Hong Kong is also not Britain. It's also about 0.1 in terms of its cultural distance from Britain. And China is, of course, not. So it is, in other words, a hybrid culture. It is something new. It was taking the best of all of these different cultures and recombining them into something new, as any good company does, as any good country does, so too do any great cities. So one big question, given the failure rate not only for companies but also startup cities around the world, is how do we ensure that these development engines succeed? What is the secret to making sure that happens? A startup, too, is not just about the rules and regulations. It is about the culture, and it is about the people that are attracted to that startup. It's about building a great team. It's about building a great community, and it's about co-creating something, as I'm seeing here, being co-created. This is an easy mistake to make because we are often trapped in our own world. So another lesson from cultural evolution is that culture is like the software that's running on our minds. And that software varies around the world. We make assumptions about one another, assume that everybody sees the world the same way. American foreign policy has made this mistake over and over again. You know, trying to bring democratic institutions to Afghanistan, a place where 14 different tribes are at war with one another. The level of cooperation, the level of governance perhaps should have been a lot lower, down to the tribal level, and then kind of built back up, right? Another piece of evidence is, does anybody know what this flag is? Liberia, right? What flag does it look like? The US flag. If you look at the Liberian Constitution, it's basically copy-paste from the US Constitution. They have the same branches of legislation. They have the same president. They have everything set up exactly the same way institutionally. But they don't have the same cultural capital, and so they are not the US. They're on the opposite end of any metric that you might consider. This is a mistake that is made over and over again, forgetting the local people, forgetting the local culture, forgetting how it has to be recreated. So I'm involved with a working group at the UNDP at the moment, developing a new human index to do with planetary aspirations, our aspirations for nature. And one of the biggest things that I emphasized is this cannot be created in the West and given elsewhere. I live in Britain, which is a garden. It's a biodiversity desert. And so when a British person talks about their relationship with nature, they're talking about gardening. Where I grew up and where I work in Namibia, nature is to be respected, it is formidable, and it is to be looked after. When we're talking about elephants, we're not just talking about elephants that you visit, we're talking about elephants trampling over people's agriculture. We're talking about leopards in the mountains that you ought to be afraid of. That is not on the mindset of people unless you live that. That is part of the culture. And there's so many more aspects of the culture, about trust, about cooperation, about what is right and wrong and how we deal with one another, that we must negotiate. And that we must find a common ground for if any of this is to work. So the culture is key. The fact that culture is key is not often spoken about, to the point where you can write an entire book about this. You know, Curtis actually put me onto this wonderful book, the Shenzhen Experiment, the story of China's instant city. People often assume that Shenzhen was this experiment that was brought from above, dropped in, and it just worked. And if that were the case, all of them would have worked. Not all of them worked, right? This is a quote from the book. In the case of Shenzhen, local negotiations and practices were just as important, if not more important, than national policies and central planning. Likewise, the local geography, history, and culture of the Shenzhen region were just as essential to its evolution as the larger national history for which it became a focal point. The urban form and organization of contemporary Shenzhen are rooted in centuries of complex cultural evolution. I don't think Joanne Du means cultural evolution in the same way, but she is effectively talking about it, just not by process. Of complex cultural evolution from earlier settlements, both rural and urban, as well as events unanticipated at the national level when the ambitious urban experiment to reform Shenzhen and China more broadly was initiated in 1979. It's precisely the points that have been brought up already. It's precisely what's required to make a startup city work. The power of a startup city is that it embodies something we now understand about innovation, that innovation is not a product of innovators per se. It is a social product of ideas flowing around between people. This is why the synergies of bringing people together in something like Silicon Zanzibar has the potential to be so powerful. It's the reason that having IIT and ASE right here can be so powerful. Because it is a social process. If you Google my name and Google the collective brain or the paradox of diversity, I probably should have put those papers up, you'll see this. So Justice Brandeis in the US Supreme Court once described US states as laboratories for democracy. And this has been one of the great secrets of the US success story. Different states or counties or lower can try different things. And if they work, other states can copy it, and eventually it can become federal law, and if it doesn't work, it fails at a local level. So here's a question for you that is very difficult to answer in advance. Should we ban non-compete agreements? What are some of the pros of banning non-compete agreements? Ideas can flow between businesses, for example. What are some of the cons? Businesses need to keep their trade secrets, right? You don't want those ideas flowing. It's hard to know in advance which of the, whether this is a yes or no. Thanks to a system where you can try experiments, sometimes accidental, you can figure out the answer to this. So in the Civil Code of the State of California from 1872, by accident, or at least nothing to do with non-compete agreements, is the following clause that says, every contract by which anyone is restrained from exercising a lawful profession, trade, or business of any kind otherwise than is provided by the next two sections is to the extent void. And what that line did was void any possibility of non-compete agreements. And so when the tech sector arose, if you wanted talent and you wanted ideas, you took the people, and they had no concerns about competing with one another. On the back of that, there was a powerful collective brain, thanks to Stanford, Berkeley, the concentration of capital and the concentration of talent that was therefore attracted to that area. There was this powerful synergy that is hard to recreate anywhere else, unless you know what you're doing. And so eventually other states began to copy this and also legislate the banning of non-competes. And as of April 23rd this year, it is banned across the country. Non-compete agreements are gone. This is just one example of a small experiment that you can try. You can try, as Prospero is doing, as Fumba Town can do. This ecosystem of learning, by the way, applies at every level. In his book, Hit Refresh, Satya Nadella explains how he turned the Microsoft monolith, which was really this large centralized company where, if anything, every subunit was every division was at each other's throat, every product unit was at the throat of every other product unit. And he said, I want to create an ecosystem of startups where you fail locally and you learn globally, and it worked fantastically. So you can see the end of Gates, the beginning of the 2000s, you can see the Ballmer era, and then you can see the massive takeoff under this new approach to innovation through a collective process. What is the key principle? If I were to distill it, it is that we experiment locally and we learn globally. We experiment and try different things and make sure that those spill over into the local economy, they spill over into the rest of the country, and perhaps spill over into the rest of the region. But cities are not exactly like businesses. For one, if a business takes a market share, there's less businesses to take. But cities can learn from one another, and people can only live in one place, really, right? So if one city grows, it doesn't have to be at the expense of another. There's plenty of people. So one of the things that all small businesses can do, and actually they do this, but also startup cities can do even more powerfully, is to experiment with best practices. In other words, steal from around the world. So in my book, I talk about Estonia, and this is a picture of me visiting Estonia to understand a little bit more about how they went from nothing to the top of the charts. So you might not know this about Estonia, but it is the top of the Western world in the OECD PISA score. So these are exams given to students around the world in reading, in mathematics, and science, and Estonia tops all of those charts. And that is incredible, because in 1991, at the end of the Soviet occupation, 50% of this country didn't even have a telephone. How did they do that, right? I just want to say a little bit more. By investing in their people, by investing in their students, many of which are here today, they also ended up as the highest number of unicorn countries, one of the highest in the world, at one point the highest in the world, but certainly the highest in Europe, the largest amount of VC funding in Europe as well. 50% of this country in 1991 didn't have a telephone. What happened? How did Estonia do it? By stealing, by copying, by remixing, by taking best practices from around the world. In 1997, the leaders of the new Estonia realized that they were a small country, that they weren't able to compete on a world stage because they didn't have the resources of their neighbors, and the future of their country depended on the future of their people. They saw the technology wave that was emerging, just as today you might see an AI wave emerging, and you might see various sectors. They saw the technology wave emerging, and they said, this is where we invest. So they created what they call Tigerhupe, or the tiger leap. We said, we were going to leap ahead of the rest of the world, something that this country can do as well. We're going to leap ahead of the rest of the world. Why and how? They incentivized their teachers in terms of their pay to create a teacher social network. They incentivized them to take the best practices. Who's good at mathematics? People in Shanghai and Singapore, steal it. They said, who's good at critical reasoning? Steal it. Who's good at writing? Steal it. Recombine it, make it local, localize it, and spread it to our people. Make sure everyone has access to a computer. Give them the skills to succeed in this new economy and to pay dividends. It's only now that those young people in Estonia are entering government. Estonia has changed, right? It has e-visas, it is a whole new world. They made that decision early on, while no one was looking, while no one was paying attention, and they reached the top of those charts. So we need to create a startup ecosystem, and we do that by copying and remixing best practices. So how do we do that? One way to do it is to learn from culturally close experiments, right? There's a limit to how much the DRC can learn from Denmark. It's often talked about like getting to Denmark. But the DRC might be able to learn from Rwanda. They might be able to learn from Tanzania, from Zanzibar. Zanzibar might be able to learn from what's going on in its neighboring countries. What I'm seeing here as an outsider is exactly the creation of that startup ecosystem. The connections to other leading institutions around the world, like IIT Madras, ASE. I'm seeing the literal creation of a map of experiments and the creation of what is going on in those experiments so that learning can take place, captured by the governance handbook, put together by these two men in the front and their collaborators, and what the Charter Cities Institute is doing with all of their amazing work in facilitating that experiment, providing those best practices on a plate to places around the world, like Fumba Town. So as I see it, I'm an outsider, but maybe I won't be for long, I don't know, I'm tempted. All I can say is that to me, Fumba Town is the seed. It is that engine for development, or at least it has that potential to be that engine for development, and it is absolutely correct that it cannot be an engine for development surrounded by people who are not part of that engine, who are not benefiting from it, and whose wages are not also rising. People come here if there is money to be made, and that money has to slosh around and splash over. There has to be trust that the regulations are not going to change. There has to be trust that you can make money in the long term and it's not going to be captured by anything. And if that is true, then Fumba Town is a seed. It could be an engine of economic growth for Zanzibar and Tanzania. And if you get it right, it can be a model for Africa and for the world. It's an amazing experiment. As I said, I'm going to talk more about this book on Thursday, but that's just a little bit about the role that startup cities can play. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, that is not on. That was great. Let's give another round of applause for Professor Michael Muthukrishnan. So we have a little change of plans. As many of you probably noticed, we are running a little behind schedule, and as many of you probably don't know, because we didn't say this, but we are live on SNTV and online, and they might be growing impatient with our tardiness, and so we've changed the last segment from a panel to a fireside chat. So I'm going to be speaking instead of with 4 people, with 1 person. And so can I call Director Halima Wagao up to the stage, please? And let's give her a round of applause as she joins me. Don't worry, the other panelists have been forewarned. I'm not just springing this on them at the last possible second. So we're adapting as we go through this. So first of all, Director, thank you for joining us very much.
You're welcome.
Do we want to start with just perhaps you introducing yourself, your title, your role at ZEPA, and for the folks, you know, I didn't go into a full description of what ZEPA is up to, so just a description of ZEPA.
Okay, I'll try not to bore everyone since we are the closing session. So I'll try to use my charm not to make everybody fall asleep. Briefly, my name is Halima Wagao. I'm the Director of Free Economic Zone from ZEPA. Basically, what we do is we're responsible for managing and administering and supervising the operation of the free economic zones. We do have 5 economic zones in total in Zanzibar. One of them is the one we're sitting on right now, called the Fumba Free Zone. We have another one in Pemba, it's called Micheweni. We also have another one at the airport, and we also have another one at Maruhubi, our headquarters of ZEPA. So those are our free economic zones that we have. Not to sound biased or anything, I know Curtis and everyone has been only talking about Fumba, but you're mostly welcome to also invest in other free economic zones. Don't limit your view and your optical nerves. So you're mostly welcome. Thank you.
Great, so I'm gonna just start off and lob an easy one, okay, Halima? So in your opinion, as Director of Free Economic Zones, what would you say are the top successes and the top challenges that economic zones have faced in Zanzibar, both in your tenure and kind of before?
I think I can start with the successes. We are seeing a living proof right now. As the predecessors have said earlier prior to me sitting here, that the free economic zones have been existing for more than 20 years. So it takes time for these things to develop and actually come into fruition. So CPS, and also we have the Fumba Uptown Living, those are one of those living, breathing successes that we have. But at the same time, as the minister said earlier today, we're still at an infant stage. So the opportunities are endless. We also have other free economic zones that we would love them to be a pinnacle for success, not only in Tanzania, but on all over Africa. So Micheweni is another area which is open where we can have another success story in that end as well. In terms of the challenges, it's very unfortunate that we have to have this discussion up here. The minister has elaborated on one of them. We have a very big juxtaposition in terms of what's happening within our free zone and outside the free zone. As a result, it creates that ambiguity between our locals and what's happening within the free zone. So I think the biggest challenge that we have is to try to relay that message to our outside community or to our surrounding communities that when we have these free zones, the whole intention of having them is to improve our job opportunities, improve our living standards, improve our employment, but it's not necessarily to segregate them from these areas. Because currently, from our local communities, it's coming off, we're creating sort of zones. It's not a good example, I would say, like we're talking about South Africa, where you have one area is different from another area. So that's where we're trying to sort of like reconjure that notion and that conception that the biggest challenge we have is that to try to merge the two communities to coexist together and not to make our locals feel like, oh, the people who are only living in those areas are this kind of people, middle class, but that's not the essence of it. Another challenge that we're facing from a policy standpoint is, as a government, we have many priorities. So the biggest challenge that we face is improving the infrastructures in these free zones. So because when you're talking about a free zone, the generic definition of that is that when you visit these areas, they already have all the necessary infrastructures for an investor just to come in and take off. In reality, in our situation is we still have a challenge of having infrastructures. So when the investor comes, we have to sort of allocate certain funds to allow those infrastructures to be in place. So as a result, that takes time from our priorities, and also it takes time from the investor's standpoint, because now they have to deviate time instead of implementing a project, waiting for us to arrange the infrastructures. So that's another challenge that we face in terms of the free zones. Yes.
Great. And what would you say, again, both in your tenure and before, the role that free zones have played in Zanzibar, driving industrialization? I know a big point of them is to attract investment as well, but also, as has been highlighted, I think, several times tonight, as zones of kind of opportunity to test out different policies that might be a priority for the government, but they want to try it out on a small scale before scaling it up elsewhere. So government priorities such as maybe the Blue Economy program or others that you could think of.
I think the biggest one, and I think everyone can be a witness to this, is value addition. So the biggest one we have is in terms of having the free zones. Apart from having the real estate projects, we are trying to increase the value addition. For the blue economy sector, that's the main target, because we have the raw materials, we are able to have the deep sea fishing, we are able to have all these activities happening within the blue economy, but then what do you do with those products? It has to come to a point where we have to export more than just the raw materials. We have to increase value in what we are producing in Zanzibar. So I think that's where the free zone can play a role in terms of having the light industries, because as an island, we are limited in space, so we cannot have heavy industries here. So I think by having those light industries, you're able to increase the value of the catches that we get from our oceans and other raw materials that we have access pertaining to blue economy. And also another area, I think it's been said earlier, I think in terms of the job creation, we have an issue there where right now for us ZIPA, we are trying to push our investors to increase not only the medial jobs or entry-level jobs for our locals, but we want to take the decision-making jobs in these establishments, in these accommodations. So we want to be the managers. We want to be, apart from just being the back-end office, we don't want to be the supporting staff anymore. We want local Zanzibaris to be the people who you sit down in board meetings and have decisions with, instead of having outsiders come in. And also, it was discussed earlier in terms of, I think Daniel mentioned in terms of having nomads come in. I think I might try to differ a little bit with Daniel in terms of we wouldn't mind having nomads, but we also like for Wasoko to think on how to improve the capacity of our youngsters from Susa and all these areas so they can also participate in those jobs. So that also we can find a balance in terms of bringing in experts from other countries, but also improving our local youth in terms of having those opportunities. As the minister says, we are all living proof that if nobody believed in us, we wouldn't be here. We have a lot of youngsters who are in these startups. We have Zanzibar Startup Association. They're looking into opportunities in terms of ICT in other areas. So that could be a stepping stone. We can use that as a stepping stone in terms of delving that into other startups as well, not only in ICT, but we can have also startups in other sectors as well that can also boost the employment, not only remedial employment, but actual career development for our youth. So I think Free Zone can play that role there as well.
So I know Director Halima is a person of many talents. She's completing a PhD on top of being Director of Free Economic Zones at ZEPA. So just kind of for yourself, why have you chosen to devote your talents to ZEPA?
Do you want a political answer?
This is not a trick question, everyone. Quit giggling mischievously.
Do you want a political answer or do you want a true answer?
I want the most entertaining answer. It's late.
Basically, it's the government. So you go where you're required. So you go where you're needed, and our job is to bring in investors. So I think we are doing a pretty damn good job, pardon my French, on that. So.
And again, it's late, so I'm going to end with a last question. And as a fellow person also working on completing a PhD, it's the question I dislike most. When are you going to finish your PhD?
Don't ask me that.
All right. Let's give a round of applause for Director Halima. Let's also give a round of applause for every other speaker and participant. Thank you so much. I would also like to say a big thank you to Heba, Jaidi, Eva, and the entire team at CCI and all the partners who helped make this happen. Thank you. Please, I know it's a weekday, but we do have some snacks, we have some drinks, so please stick around if you can and mingle and have some conversations. We would love to talk to all of you about all the things we discussed tonight. So thank you very much again.
couldn't be more excited to formalize this partnership with ZRCP. I think we are working on a lot of aligned areas, and in particular there are 3 pillars to this partnership that we're working on now with ZRCP. One is around policy briefs and writing different policy for government, different government agencies and government ministries, which we're very excited about. The second is around convening. So after we've written and co-drafted these policy briefs, together we can bring the different agencies and ministries required for policy implementation together and coordinate and help convene and provide coalitions to get policies and drive policies forward. And then the third that I'm also really excited about is working with ZRCP to provide a roadmap for implementation and whatnot. So I'm excited to sign this partnership. I'll hand it over to Dr. Kalfan to say a few words.
Thanks, sir. Thank you for the courtesy. Just to add to what you mentioned, there is an institute that's focused on conducting empirical research and policy analysis. So the aim is to bridge the gap between the policy and what's kind of required in Zanzibar, the area of social and economic policy. So I believe and I'm excited on behalf of the university with this new arrangement, because I'm quite positive that we will have to not only to convey but to disseminate the fact finding, but to bring input to the community.
Absolutely. So we'll sign and then we'll shake hands and exchange Thanks, guys. So when I first came to Fumba town, I met with Honorable Minister Suranga. He was a Fumba town resident. Now I can proudly say that I also am a Fumba town resident, so Honorable Minister and myself are now neighbors. And so this is from one neighbor to another. The Charter Cities Institute is very happy, number one, and honored that you are here tonight to speak and provide the keynote address. We are also very happy to provide this Charter Cities Atlas. Goes over some historical new city developments that we're very proud of. Thank
yani hapa
SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu.
ngoja utapata boss sijali.
SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV Online. Huu ni wakati wetu. SNTV Online. Huu ni